All right, so Kimi K3 just dropped and people are already stacking it against Gemini Notebook for research work, the stat that got my attention. Kimi K3 ranked 4th out of 189 models on the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index, which means you've got a frontier model going up against a grounded RAG tool. Both tools launched or updated recently, and if you do any kind of document research, picking the wrong one costs you real time and money. I ran them through 4 real tests, same conditions, same prompts, and everything you'll see comes from verified sources, official docs, and independent benchmarks, no vendor spin. And honestly, the thing that surprised me most wasn't the intelligence score or the context window. It was the pricing structure and specifically what happens when you go to actually access Kimi K3 for free, because that answer might change which one you pick today. So this comparison is for you if you're doing research, synthesizing documents, or trying to build any kind of knowledge workflow without burning through a budget. The tool you pick here either saves you hours or sends you down a rabbit hole of API keys, top-ups, and hallucinated summaries. And that's a real cost, not a hypothetical one. Test 1 is long context document summarization. And what goes wrong here is really specific. You upload a 200-page PDF, the model returns a confident-sounding summary, and you later find out it just made up the numbers in table 4. That's not a minor annoyance. That's a report you send to someone with bad data in it. What I looked at here was context, capacity, and accuracy on buried information. Kimi K3 supports 1,048,576 tokens in one request, which is genuinely huge, but the vendor docs actually acknowledge that relevant info can get lost in very long inputs. Gemini Notebook caps each source at 500,000 words, and every answer links back to its exact source location. So that citation grounding is the real differentiator. Take this with a grain of salt because the units aren't directly comparable. Kimi K3's 1 million tokens and Gemini Notebook's 500k words per source aren't on the same scale. And one community report did say Kimi K3 pulled a specific table correctly from a 200-page PDF where Notebook returned a hallucination. But that's one data point, not a controlled benchmark. Honestly, I was expecting Kimi K3's raw context size to just run away with this one. And what actually happened is it's tied. The 1 million tokens are impressive, but Notebook's strict source grounding and inline citations solve a different and honestly more pressing problem for most people. So the scoreboard sits at 0-0, one tied. Test 2 is multi-source research synthesis. And what trips people up here is the tool either refuses to go get sources from the web or it mashes them together without telling you which claim came from where. Both of those hurt. One wastes your time, the other gets you in trouble. So here's what I found. Kimi K3's deep research mode actually browses the live web, plans a research strategy, reads pages, and writes a cited report on its own, which is pretty impressive. Gemini Notebook doesn't touch the web at all, but for closed corpus work across up to 50 uploaded sources, Notebook links every answer to its exact source with a granularity Kimi K3 doesn't match. And this is kind of where it gets interesting, because these two tools aren't really doing the same thing. Kimi K3 ranked 4th of 189 models on the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index. But Gemini Notebook doesn't even appear in those rankings because it's a RAG tool, not a general purpose model. So comparing them directly on synthesis is a little bit like comparing a search engine to a library. I was expecting one of them to clearly dominate here, and what I got instead is another tie, because they're genuinely solving different problems. Kimi K3 wins if you need live web research, Notebook wins if your sources are already uploaded, and neither beats the other outright, so the scoreboard stays at 0-0. Now, 2 tests tied. Test 3 is pricing and access transparency. And what bites people here is super concrete. You see Kimi K3 mentioned as free, you go to try it and you find out the free chat tier runs K2. 6, not K3, so you've just wasted time setting up an account for a different model than you wanted, which is genuinely frustrating. When I looked at the actual pricing, Kimi K3 API costs $3 per million tokens on a cache miss, $15 per million on output, and there's a minimum $1 top up to even start. Gemini Notebook's free tier gives you 100 notebooks, 50 sources each, and 50 daily chat queries at 0 cost. And the entry paid tier is $7.99 a month versus Kimi's $15. To be fair, Kimi K3 does have a launch rebate running through August 2026, a 10 to 30% top-up voucher that partially offsets the cost. And if you're a developer who needs API access, the pricing is clearly published with cached and non-cached rates. But Gemini Notebook has no public API at all. So if you need programmatic access, Notebook just isn't in the conversation. I was expecting this to be closer, and it really isn't. Gemini Notebook takes this one cleanly because a permanent free tier with real utility beats a paid API every time for casual research users. And that puts the scoreboard at Gemini Notebook 1, Kimi K3 0, with 2 tests still tied. Test 4 is response latency on large uploads. And what kills your workflow here is you paste in a massive document, hit send, and then you're just sitting there waiting almost 4 minutes before you see a single token come back. That's not a workflow, that's a coffee break you didn't plan for. and it compounds badly if you're running multiple queries. What I found here is pretty one-sided in terms of available data. Artificial analysis benchmarks. Kimi K3 at 237.83 seconds time to first token on a 10,000 token workload, which is very slow and driven by max reasoning effort running by default. And once it starts generating, it moves at 33 tokens per second. For Gemini Notebook, there's no published latency benchmark at all, so a real comparison just isn't possible. Honestly, the missing data on Gemini Notebook side makes this hard to score fairly. Kimi K3 also had frequent 429 capacity errors at launch, according to OpenRouter, which is a real short-term concern, and Notebook's RAG architecture skips the reasoning overhead entirely, so it's probably faster for index source queries. We just don't have the numbers to prove it. I was expecting latency to be a clear Gemini Notebook win, and what actually happened is we can't call it because the data is too one-sided. Kimi K3's 237 seconds is the only published figure, and Notebook has nothing comparable, so this goes down as a tie, and the final scoreboard lands at Gemini Notebook 1, Kimi K3 0, 3 tests tied. So where does Kimi K3 actually win? Live web research, full stop. It's the only tool here that autonomously browses the web, reads pages, and writes a cited report, and it handles 1,048,576 tokens in a single request, so entire code bases or paper collections go in at once. Model weights drop publicly by July 27th, 2026, which matters a lot if self-hosting is on your roadmap. Gemini Notebook wins on access and citation reliability. The free tier gives you 100 notebooks, 50 sources each, 50 daily queries, no credit card required, and every answer links to its exact source, which directly cuts hallucination risk. There's no API setup, no top-up, no developer config, and at $7.99 a month, it's roughly half of Kimi's entry paid tier if you do go paid. Honestly, I was expecting a cleaner winner, and what I got as a tool type split. If you need live web research, agentic synthesis, or million token document ingestion, go with Kimi K3, just expect to pay, configure an API, and wait out the launch capacity issues. If your sources are already in hand and you want reliable citations at zero cost, Gemini Notebook is the straightforward pick.